I'm Lloyd Holliday, and this is the Cost of a Thing podcast. Thanks for listening in today. The cost of a thing is the amount of time that you must spend working to buy the things that you want and need. And that directly determines your standard of living. And the American standard of living is what this podcast is all about. And I'm going to be discussing anything that affects that standard of living, especially those things that affect it negatively. And especially those things that have lowered our standard of living from the one that we had in America here in the 1960s, which was better than the one today. And why am I doing this? Because I don't see the government addressing these issues. I don't see the media addressing these issues. They've either forgotten them or ignored them. And these are some of the most important things that determine, of course, how we're going to live, how well we're going to live in the world today, especially for the young people. Okay, I'm doing a podcast today about Ross Perot. He was a businessman. He owned electronic data systems, I think out of Dallas. He was from Texas. And he ran for president in 1992 and I think again in 1996. And he got a pretty good amount of the vote for a non-traditional party. He was in, I think it was called the Reform Party, or he didn't run as a Democrat or Republican. And I think with him running it, it did wind up giving the election to Bill Clinton. I think George Bush the first might have won that. But anyway, he ran in those elections, and he ran as an independent candidate. And of course, the reason why I'm doing this is I heard that he had passed away like a week or so ago at age 89. And I just wanted to, do a podcast about, his memory, kind of recalling some of the things that he stood for. And I think he was a good American, and he certainly tried his best. I know he ended up being a billionaire because of his business, and that's how he ran for president. He didn't take donations so much to do it. He was independently running with his own money back then in 92 and again in 96. But I guess what I remember most about Ross Perot is he was a straight shooter. He told the truth, and it seemed to me back then, as I remember, he wanted what was best for America. And it was a time when America was going kind of globalist, and he was more of a nationalist type guy, and he wanted what was best for America. And the two things I remember that he was like the centerpiece of his campaign back then, I think these are the two things I remember. There may be more, but these are the ones I remember. He was concerned about the large accumulated federal deficit at the time. And at the time, it was $5 trillion. I remember something right around that figure. And of course, today, that has ballooned up now, 28 years later, 27 years later. We're up to $22 trillion accumulated federal deficits now. So, Ross Perot was concerned about the $5 trillion, reducing our standard of living back in 1992, 91 and 92 when he ran. And now we've got a $22 trillion. So you can imagine what he would think about that. And that's one of the reasons we have a lower standard of living today, is because of that huge debt that's out there hanging over our heads. And the other thing, and this was even bigger in Ross, that I think Ross Perot was for was he was not in favor of NAFTA, the Free North American Free Trade Act that was floating through Congress at the time, and he was against that. And he said it would, I think these are his own words, he said it would result in a huge sucking sound when you'd see the jobs get sucked out of America. And the other side was, oh no, this is going to add jobs. It's going to make America richer with the trade to Mexico and Canada and all that. And it turned out that Ross Perot was right about that, and the other side was wrong. We've had a net loss in jobs over NAFTA, and of course now Trump is trying to renegotiate that, get that through Congress, and I don't know if he'll be able to do that. I think he has at least done something on it, but Ross Perot did not want that. He wanted the jobs to stay in America, and that would make a strong America. And he wanted us to have no national debt or very little. That would make a strong America and a good standard of living for all the people. And that's what I remember about Ross Perot. He was, like I say, I think he was a good man and a good American, and probably he should have been the president elected in 1992. But you know, a lot of people will only vote for their party, and most people are either Democrat or Republican, and it's very hard to get people to break out of that and go independent or for a third party. And I think he probably should have won that. He had the ideas. It's just that, you know, people didn't know that he was right at the time, and they thought, we'll just keep ringing up deficits and we'll ship our jobs overseas and we'll be, you know, just as well off, and they didn't believe him. But now I think more people are starting to understand that he was right. I certainly do. And I remember on one of his campaign ads, or when he was in a debate or something like that, he said that the $5 trillion deficit at the time in 1991, with that amount of money, you could buy everybody west of the Mississippi in America a $100,000 house. And that kind of stuck with me. Even to now, I remember those figures. That's how much money $5 trillion is. Of course, we owe like four and a half times that now. And another thing that shows Ross Perot was right is the fact that more than 7,000, since 1991, more than 7,000 American factories have relocated either to Mexico or China or another country. And that is that giant sucking sound that Ross Perot was talking about. We're all hearing it right now. It's very, very loud. And with those 7,000 plus factories that left America in the last 20 some years, millions of good paying American manufacturing jobs, a lot of them with good benefits and all that, have left America too. And that is why we're seeing the reduced standard of living. It's some of the reasons, some of the main reasons why, and some of the ones I've talked about already in my top 10 super rip-offs videos that are out there. The first 7 of them are out there right now. You can listen to those if you want. Those are the super rip-offs that are going on right now in America that have reduced our standard of living since the 1960s. And of course, Ross Perot was not a politician. He was a businessman. And of course, the parties hated that. They want their anointed, you know, next guy that they groom, one of those people that are high up in the Democratic Party or high up in the Republican Party, that they groom for that position to be president. And of course, they got that with Bill Clinton. Well, he was one of their groomed candidates at the time, and George Bush certainly was on the Republican side. And so they ridiculed, the press ridiculed him, and they made fun of his accent, and it was just, they really made a full mockery of everything that he was about. I mean, on the talk shows and the news, and he was just really mocked for being this, this little goofy guy from Texas that thought he could be president, and he just, they made him out to be a fool, basically, and that's what they do. That's what the press does, and I think it's kind of despicable what they do, but they do it with anybody that doesn't fit into their, their mold that they want to see. I mean, they basically raked Ross Perot over the coals. I mean, the press, everything in the press was pretty much negative against him, and that, but he still got almost 20% of the vote, or a little over 20% in '92 anyway. And like I said, I think he should have won that election, but it turned out Clinton won, and he went, that then the country moved even more into a globalist stance under Bill Clinton, and a lot of job shipping, a lot of deals with China, a lot of deregulation of Wall Street so they could ship their jobs overseas. So Ross Perot did not win the 1992 presidential election. He did not win in '96 again, and basically we've had globalist presidents ever since, and even the one before that, George Bush Sr., who was elected in 1988, he was a globalist and was making these trade deals with China and bringing them into the World Trade Organization. He was a big globalist. And then you had, of course, Bill Clinton was a super big globalist. He was the one that pushed NAFTA right through and got that, him and Al Gore got that approved. And more jobs went overseas and over the border. And then after that, of course, you had George W. Bush for 8 years, and he was a super big globalist, just like his dad. And after that, of course, Obama was a really super giant, huge globalist. So we've had globalists since 1988. So 30 plus years of globalists. Then we got Trump in there. He's not. He seems to be a nationalist. Now, I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know. So we'll see if he can, slow down this globalism. I don't know. That'll remain to be seen. But 30 years plus of globalists. Reagan, I don't think, was a globalist. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know enough about Reagan, but I don't think he was. I think he was more of a nationalist for America. But anyway, and I would encourage anybody to go ahead and listen to Ross Perot and his speeches, his campaign speeches, his debates from the '92 or '96 campaign. I know that many of them are on YouTube, and it's really good listening, and I think anybody that wasn't there, especially the younger people, would learn a lot about how we got where we are, and why our standard of living has decreased because of these huge federal deficits and the massive factory movement overseas. And it'll help you understand how we got where we are today. Anyway, I remember Ross Perot as a no-nonsense, straight shooter, straight talker. He'd come up on the TV, his ads would have like charts on there, like pie charts showing how big the deficits were and stuff. Nobody'd ever done that. He was trying to explain to the American people how screwed up that everything was, but most of them didn't get it or didn't want him. So this is my little tribute to Ross Perot today. Ross Perot was right on both the deficits and the NAFTA agreement, the job shipping, free trade deals, quote, free trade deals. And they have weakened America. They have hurt our standard of living. The more money you owe, of course, the lower your standard of living is going to be. And when you ship your good manufacturing jobs out to foreign countries, your standard of living is going to go down in America, and it has. And thank you, Ross Perot, for bringing that out all those years ago. And I guess that's all I've got to say about it. Thank you for listening in today. And until next time, this is Lloyd Holliday signing off.